Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
Hey, Gary.
John, how are you?
Doing well.
Good,
you too?
Good. Doing very well. And it's only 89 here in Detroit. And for many of our viewers, I'm sure it's much hotter where they are. So keep cool as much as you can.
Hot fun in the summertime.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
Hey, let's bring in Craig Cole from EV Pulse. Hello, Craig.
How you doing, guys?
Good to have you on the show.
Nice seeing
Thank
you.
you for inviting me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Long time no see, Gary. I saw you at the Crown event a week or so ago.
That's true. I missed last week's show because I was in Austin, Texas with Mr. Cole and many others, and seeing the official introduction of the 16th generation Toyota Crown, all hybrid vehicle. Interesting car.
And it was hot down there, believe it or not.
Yeah.
It gets warm in Texas.
Yeah.
It does.
Hey, let's bring in our special guest, Boris Shulkin from Magna. He's Executive Vice President, and that CDIO you see with his lower third is Chief Digital and Information Officer. But Boris, it's awesome to have you on the show.
Happy to be here, John. Thank you. Hello, Gary. Hi, Craig.
How you doing?
Hi.
So Boris, give us a sense of what your span of influence is within Magna. What do you do now?
John, I know very familiar. I've been doing for the last several years. I've been doing technology investments for Magna, and that responsibility stays with me. So many of the investments in tech companies, our relationship with VCs and startups around the world, I continue to oversee that area. And with this new responsibility, I'm extending into exactly what it says, the digital and information officer. So there's two parts to that. One part of it is kind of a traditional IT and making sure that all the systems within the company are humming and the water is flowing through the digital pipes. And then the other part of it, which is very interesting, exciting for me personally, is the digitization part of it. How do we make the leap into the new era of digital transformation where we can gain extra efficiencies by digitizing our processes and bringing the new technologies into the Magna groups and divisions to make things better, faster, and cheaper.
So, Boris, give us an example of what you're talking about. I mean, it's all great and fine to say all this digitization and blah, 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 high-tech terminology. Give us a real for instance.
So, Magna is a very large company. If you think about it, 350 manufacturing facilities in 34 countries around the world. The information availability to the right people at the right time has a real value to it, right? So a short version of that slogan that I keep whenever we discuss these initiatives is seamless access to trusted data. People making very important decisions on daily basis, hourly basis sometimes, based on the information they have available. And if the information is not available or difficult to get, right, or not in the form at the right time, at their fingertips, that's what makes inefficient decisions. So helping our groups and our divisions to get that in place is a big part of it. So seamless access to trusted data.
Is cybersecurity a big concern that you have to deal with in your organization?
Cybersecurity is certainly one of the columns there for sure, yes. I mean, as any large enterprise out there, with systems that are, connected and interconnected, you always have to think about this. And cyber events is a daily events for us. So that does fall within my responsibilities as well.
So everyone has a firewall set up on their computer and to keep the bad guys out.
I wish it was that simple, Craig. But yes.
Of course, I'm intrigued by what you're talking about here of getting, trusted information to people the second they need it. Because, there's this whole, was it Kevin Spacey, 6 Degrees of Separation that, anybody within 6 people knows somebody, just about everybody in the world. And what I'm getting at is within Magna, and it's a gigantic, what are you, I think the 4th largest automotive supplier in the world.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is so many people working there. Anything that Magna is working on, there is probably somebody in the company that has the right information or the right answer. But how do you find that person? How does that person even become aware that the information that they have is needed? Is anything like that you're working on?
Well, of course, that's a part of it, right? Like how do you find the right solutions and the use cases, right? So for example, if somebody within the company already done that use case and really worked for that division, how do you make sure that people are aware of this and be able to reuse this instead of duplicating the same effort over and over again, right? That's one part of it. The other part of it is kind of really important. If you talk to data people and analytics people that deal with these type of topics on a daily basis, they'll tell you that 95% of the effort today on an average project that related to data is about getting the data, formatting the data, getting ready the data for the use of the people. And then the actually analytical part of it, the analyzing data and doing something with it, is a very, very small percentage. So with these efforts, we're trying to turn the table upside down and say, you know what, we don't need to spend this amount of time on something that can be done ahead of time and be ready for people and have it at their fingertips. They should be spending their time on what to do with this data on the solution part of it.
So all of that processing, is that done in the cloud? Do you guys do that on the ground with supercomputers? How are you guys handling all of that?
Well, where do I start, right? There's so many applications, right? It really depends on what you do with specific situation, right? If we're talking about, for example, data-related efforts in ADAS and autonomy, right? A lot of the data collection obviously is happening on the edge, right? That gets collected, and then in the cloud, a lot of post-processing is happening. Sometimes it's done on-prem type of equipment. Sometimes it's done directly into the cloud. A lot of these decisions, not necessarily technical. A lot of times these decisions are business and cost-driven as well, because these type of data, for example, if you take the ADAS verification type of data, that is just a huge amounts of data that coming even from a single car. Now you multiply it by hundreds of vehicles that are being tested in a prototype, by millions of miles that have been collected. And so that even the processing of the data, just the raw processing, is a very significant effort. Not everything can be done in the cloud. So these are hybrid solutions.
Gotcha. Boris, I want to ask you a little bit about the investment part of your job. Now, I'm sure many people think of Magna, automotive supplier, classic big industrial company, and yet Magna is transforming itself more into electrical, electronics, digitization, and so on. And I mean, a lot of that, I would believe, has to come from, as you were looking at the landscape of different kinds of companies. I mean, what was it that you look for when you're looking for companies to partner or participate with?
So Gary, the way I would describe it is not what we look for, but maybe the process itself, because that probably is more meaningful here. If you think about it, how do you approach a problem of where do you have the gaps? Every time we look at the area where we want to grow, and electrification and autonomy, certainly those areas of high growth where we really focus, and you can tell it from our actions in the last several years, that we highly focus on those areas. So the way we approach it is by saying, I don't have nobody really has an answer when it's coming and what it's coming. So but certainly these things are coming. So the timing is very important here. So how do you get prepared for the right time so you have the right solutions for that time? So the approach we take, and it's a similar approach in electrification or autonomy or other emerging areas, is an approach of building blocks. So we look at which building blocks do we have in-house today, and our operating divisions are taking care of these pieces, right? But then there are gaps based on this analysis. And then so we have a very specific focus on those areas that we consider gaps. And then we call it, open for business mentality. We'll go out and then we look, how do I solve this gap? I can solve it by working with somebody on the outside. The JV with LG could be one one of those examples, right? Or it could be done through investing. If this is a long-term type of a gap, right, could be done through investment into a startup company or maybe working together with a university. So we pursue them that way, right? Or it could be a topic that we believe is really long out, and then we would have what I would call a passive investment that allows us to watch that area, understand what is happening without really, being fully committed right now, but having an ability to understand it and watch it and jump in when it becomes ready. So that's kind of the overall framework that they approach it. So there's no a single cookie cutter approach in each situation. We stay extremely flexible and open in each specific relationship. So that's the approach that we take.
Boris, you're a guy who really follows the auto industry, and you're very well plugged in. What's your sense of? We're getting some feedback there. What's going on there? But what's your sense of EV adoption, especially in the U.S. market? As you know, the Biden administration wants 50% by 2030. Some people are a lot more bullish it'll happen sooner than that. Others not so bullish. What's your sense of it?
Well, this is a great question, John. We've talked about this a lot in the past as well. Guessing the EV adoption rate at this point, given the what's been happening in the last couple of years, is like throwing a dart at a dartboard, right? If you look at what's been going on and even take the IHS data or any of the agencies out there that do this professionally, the take rates for 2030, for example, has changed drastically in the last year. You can look at this a year ago and 6 months ago and today, and the numbers are drastically different. Some of them are doubling for certain years. It's I think we live through right now. We're living through the era where anybody's guess is a good guess. One thing for sure, it's happening. It's definitely being pushed by multiple vectors. One of them, of course, is the government regulations. That's what's been, main effect from several years back. The CO2 emissions, the other things that our governments are doing in different areas, including Europe and China, very specific action from governments. What's really been changing in the last, I would say, year and a half is that the consumer acceptance and consumer desire to have some of these vehicles is changing, specifically in Europe and China, and even in US at a slower rate as well. Look, if you look at North America, we all know we live here. 1 in 5 purchasing vehicle decision is related to a truck. And if you start thinking about it that way, okay, if there was a solution for a truck that is acceptable and utility value is there on a comparable level, that would change consumer acceptance in US quite significantly. And you see it from the actions from the OEMs, and you guys were aware Magna is doing quite a bit in that area as well. And then maybe the last point I would mention here, John, is what's coming. The push is coming from the opposite direction. We all see the raw material situation. If you look at the price of nickel, the price of cobalt, lithium, right? The price change from a year and a half ago could potentially, you've seen the numbers, some of them are 5 times of what it used to be. What that really means for the affordability of these vehicles, and what it really means for availability for the volume prediction of build for those vehicles as well. And then the last piece that I believe the industry has not looked really carefully yet, but I think they should, is recyclability of this, right? Because if you look at the batteries of the past, we are, north of 90% recyclable, but the batteries of today and the future are nowhere near that. You're lucky if with some effort it's in single digits. So there's those pressures together with the pressures on the raw materials and geopolitical situations related to the raw materials. Those are the pressures that are pushing it back. So again, my dartboard, usually it's not so bad. On this one, I would say it's probably as good as yours.
John's question around a little bit do you have any sense how long internal combustion will be sticking around? Because we're transitioning, obviously, we're in the transition period right now, but it's not going to be a light switch, right? So I got to imagine
it
combustion is going
certainly
to stick
won't.
around.
Yeah, it certainly won't. Correct. So the way I'm thinking about this is there's a long tail to any of that, even if for anything else but for the natural reasons. The vehicle that you're producing today is going to be there for 10 to 15 years. That means that there's all consequences related to the fact that these vehicles remain on the road for that amount of time, even if we stop today, which we won't, right? So the right way to think about this is that there is a long tail, I would believe, to many of these technologies, and that is here with us to stay. The really big question is to what levels, and that obviously would highly depend on the first question and related to all the variables that I've talked about answering the EV side of the question.
Mm-hmm. Boris, you mentioned the increase in the price of raw materials. And when we look at an electric vehicle, I mean, the battery is where a lot of the cost is based. And, I begin to wonder, will scale have any effect on perhaps driving the cost of EVs down, or is that not conceivable?
Well, in many of the areas, of course, right? If you start looking at a manufacturing area, which I personally very, very excited about, because there's so many opportunities in manufacturing to drive some of this cost down, right? Ultimately, then there's lots of opportunities there. If you look at issues like, for example, structural battery integrations, right? What does it mean for the body? What does it mean for seating? All these things are very, very connected in a very integral way. But at the same time, if you look at the volumes have been growing. I was just reading yesterday with European volumes dropping down, the EVs are actually volumes themselves going up, right? With overall volumes going down, EV absolute numbers are going up and the relative numbers are going up. So the volumes have been going up. Yet the raw material costs have been going up with it. That makes me pause and think about it, because if we all look at the prediction of the price per kilowatt of battery, for example, from 2 to 3 years ago, it's been steadily predicted to fall down, right? With numbers falling below $100. What does it really mean to the future? This is a big open question. And I think that question related not only to the volumes themselves, it's related to some of the geopolitical issues that I think we're all aware of.
So basically, is it possible then that EVs could run into a price wall? I mean, that it's going to be what it's going to be. I mean, you're going to take the manufacturing issues out, but still the raw materials are going to be a big issue that needs to be dealt with. And when the average transaction price of a vehicle right now is $48,000, for an internal combustion engine. It seems to me that this whole issue of affordability might put something of a damper, if not, a complete halt on the growth of EV sales.
I won't venture to guess on this topic. I would only say that my personal view on this is that in a short period of time, all these scenarios are very possible, and it's difficult to predict. In a long term, and by long term, I mean past, 2030, and you pick your next number, 3, 4, 5, the trend will remain, of course, that it will have to start converging. How this is going to realize itself is very difficult to say. I mean, many bets were given, of course, on the new battery technology. I don't see myself in the next 5 to 8 years in terms of fundamental high volume that we're going to be anywhere outside of lithium-ion technology that we today all using, with some variations. I mean, you see that, for example, Tesla has been shifting significantly in the direction of LFPs for multiple reasons in terms of chemistry, right? The cobalt is one of those reasons. Some people say they don't know for sure, but some people say that the content of lithium is also a little bit lower on the chemistry there. But that, the nickel is going up, and nickel has potential to be even more difficult potentially than the cobalt itself. The problem with cobalt, it's restricted to a single geographical area. The problem with nickel is that it's been used not only in batteries. There's all kinds of consumers of nickel out there, and there's only certain type of nickel that can be used for this application. So fortunately I don't have a good answer for you, Gary. I think the summary is that in the long term, I think we're going to be okay. In the short term, it's going to really depend on so many factors that I won't venture to answer.
Boris, what's your sense of where contract manufacturing is going to go? Magna's been a leader in the field really for decades now. I think you guys have built several million vehicles at the plant in Steyr. You're going to be making the Ocean for Fisker. It's turning to Foxconn to make its next model. You've got a plant in China, right, for ArcFox, if I remember right. But yep. What's your sense? Is it going to grow beyond that, or where's contract manufacturing going?
Look, that's thanks, John. This is a great question. Look, I would start by saying that this industry is complex. The car industry, not necessarily as simple as that some outsiders may think about it. It's not only complex in manufacturing, it's also complex. It's a high-tech industry today, and we're going through this revolution of really significant change. And that change is not simplifying the industry. It's making it more interesting with software, more interesting meaning more complex, right? With software and other things coming in, multi-materials. Magna is in a very unique position. We can do it, right? We've been doing this, like you've mentioned. We've made 3.7, I believe the number is, million vehicles with 50 various models. We've done the ICE, we've done the EVs. We're launching several vehicles today. You've mentioned the Fisker is one of them. Look, we have facility in Graz that's very well known. We have a facility, a joint facility in China where we're producing ArcFox as well. We remain open to opportunities in North America when the right opportunity comes in. So maybe a summary, I should say, we're in a very fortunate position to have this know-how, to have this experience, and to be able to do this. We have many OEM partners that we've been doing this in the past. We continue talking to many of them. Every newcomer that comes into this field, we kind of a natural stop for them to come and talk. So we remain ready, remain excited about this. As I said, my take on this, it's complex enough industry, and with Magna know-how and experience, very fortunate to be in that unique position.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see more of this occurring? I mean, do you see traditional OEMs saying, maybe we'll concentrate less on the making of a vehicle and spend more time on the design and engineering of the vehicle?
Well, I think the right way to think about it is it really depends, right? Depends on what's the right capacity in this particular situation, what's the right build for this particular situation. So I don't think there's a cookie cutter answer to say the trend is going this way or that way. I think in case of an OEM, it's a very specific to the specific needs on that specific model, right? What fits and how do you manage the volumes in the region? For the new entrants, I think it's a very different thing. Many new entrants that want to be successful here in that field, make decisions to be asset light, and for them, it's a one-stop shop. And basically, that's a perfect solution in their case. And many of them some of them take advantage of that. As Fisker would be one example. Mm-hmm. So that's how I look at it, Gary. No single answer there.
How does that work? An OEM comes to you. Do you guys have a menu of options and they just select, we want you to manufacture this vehicle. We want you to do the engineering on these features. How does that work? Can you give us a sense?
Well, so Magna has a capability that runs across the entire spectrum, right? We can engineer a vehicle, we can manufacture a vehicle, and of course, the bulk of our business, we can supply multiple various subsystems into this, right? We can manage the purchasing. So it really depends on specific needs of specific customer at that point in time on that project, right? And in some cases, it's a complete spectrum. In some cases, it's certain pieces of it. And we have multiple examples of all of these combinations.
Boris, you're
So
a guy
if I
that
want to do the Craig Cole EV startup, I'll give you a call.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Coal car.
There you go. Rolling coal.
As long as the business case works.
Boris, you're a guy that gets to look at all kinds of technology and the like. Is there something out there that really excites you about what's coming that's maybe flying under the radar that you could share with us?
It's interesting, John. Of course, I can be sitting here and saying, look, John, I'm so excited about this technology X in EV or technology Y in autonomy, and the list can go on and on. And, you know me for a long time, I can give you a long laundry list. But really the way I think about this is what I'm really excited is about manufacturing. Magna is in such a unique position. At the end of the day, Craig is looking to see how many EVs can be produced out in the world. Not a single one of them can be done with, only the bytes and the kilobytes of software, right? Every time you need an EV or any vehicle, right? At the end of the day, somebody needs to put the molecules together. So every opportunity and technologies that make our manufacturing better, more effective, this is where I see a lot of things are happening. Maybe, it sounds sometimes less sexy, but the reality of it is, it's not real until it rolls off of the end of a line. And so we really spend a lot of time looking at what can we do better in manufacturing? What are the different technologies? So if I think about it, there's so many opportunities there, right? Related to automation, related to robotics, related to the digitization and things around the data in manufacturing. Just an endless opportunities. Of course, it does not diminish what is happening in EV and autonomy, and we can talk about these things. We've talked about many of those things, about our digital radar, about many other stuff, but the manufacturing is what excites me right now.
So we haven't talked a great deal about autonomy. Where do you see that in terms of its growth curve?
Autonomy is a big world, so I always think about it as two pieces of it, right? The full autonomy, meaning the L4, L5, right? And then the ADAS systems, what you can buy from a dealer today, L2 plus type of systems. Look, it's another dartboard type of a problem. Is it going to happen at some point in time? There's no doubt about it. It will. The only question is when. And that timeline has been extended year after year for multiple various reasons. So the way I think about this is many of the full autonomy type of topics are driven by new mobility conversations, by various needs within restricted fleets and things like that, where this can be rolled out with the right boundary conditions, right? While all this development is happening, right, and it's going to take a little bit of a time in terms of safety and consumer acceptance and multiple topics like this. I'm sure you're all reading some of the events that are happening in with autonomy fleets. Even the simple stuff is not easy to sometimes to deal with. While all of this happening, and it's going to take years, there's a huge opportunity in ADAS. We only starting to get the consumer acceptance today. Like, I'm going to give you a simple example. 5 years ago, probably most of us would not think about it, but the backup camera when you put in reverse driving. I have 4 kids, 3 of them have been driving, and every time they get in a vehicle without one, they don't know what to do. So that's just one simple example. But the things like ACC, for example, right? 5 years ago, most people would not even use it. Today, people start getting used to the comfort and convenience of some of these basic features. So I'm a big fan of what is happening in L2, L2 Plus for reasons of affordability, for the reasons of consumer acceptance. These features are making our life easier and better, and we're still in a low double-digit take rates there. So there's a lot to do in that field in the next 5-8 years. That area is going to grow tremendously, in my opinion. So lots to do there. And then some of it can serve as a base for the future acceptance from consumers of the higher levels of autonomy. So this is the reason why we at Magna take this approach of, really focusing on the ADAS part of the business, but remaining relevant through our partnerships with some of the investments and other partnerships that we're doing with real players in L4, L5 area as well.
Boris, I really agree with what you're saying on backup cameras. If I get in a car these days, an older car that doesn't have them, it's like, I don't feel safe backing up. My neck is turning every which, my head's turning every which way.
Right.
So that's a great point. But hey, look, we're at the bottom of the hour here. So I want to thank you for coming on. We're going to take a quick commercial break, but we'll definitely have you back in the future. You sure know a lot of things going on in the industry here.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks, Boris.
Nice to meet you.
We'll be back in just a minute.
Bridgestone tires use Traction Pro technology to provide traction in all terrains. But let us focus on the design. You just focus on the destination ahead. What really matters is they're Bridgestone.
And we're back.
Already?
Back already. Yes, Craig.
So we had Ford made a big announcement today about its electric future, sort of segueing from what Boris was talking about, this transition, and really focusing, it seems to me, on getting the materials to make batteries in the future.
That's kind of important. The batteries, believe it or not.
So do you guys think that the amount of investment is going to essentially pay off for them? I mean, because Ford is rapidly increasing the take rate that it believes its vehicles will have. So it's talking about having the 600,000 electric vehicle capacity by late 2023, which isn't so long from now.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, in fact, I was stunned at the number they said for Mach-E's. They expect to be selling 270,000 of them globally, but about 100,000 plus in China alone. But you're right, Gary. The big announcement today was to assure Wall Street, especially, that they're able to get the raw materials that they need to make all the batteries, and they've got contracts lined up to get the full battery packs. But it wasn't complete, because even though they say they're going to have 100% of everything they need by the end of next year, by the end of, 2026 or something
Correct.
like that, they only have, 70 or 80%? 70% lined up, right?
Well, that was for their 2 million vehicles, wasn't it?
For the 2 million vehicles, right? But what I want to know is
2 million plus.
2 million plus. What is the last 30% that they haven't been able to lock up yet? And why have they not been able to lock? Yeah.
No, but I mean, this gets back to this question of, John, you remember we had Eric Noble on the show from the Car Lab?
Yeah.
And basically he was making the argument about the problem of scaling electric vehicles because of the material costs.
Right.
And he was saying, okay, if you run Tiffany's, diamonds cost what diamonds cost, and it doesn't matter how many you put in that ring, they still have the same price.
Right.
So how do you get around that? Now, maybe part of what Ford is doing is saying, okay, we'll tie in these contracts now, so inflation won't cause a huge rise. But I still begin to wonder if there isn't something to what Eric Noble had been saying.
Well, he's right. I mean, the batteries can't go below the cost of the raw materials. That's an impossibility. But what we're going to be seeing probably in the 2025, 26 time range is the next generation of batteries. I mean, Tesla's already talking about this, of a new manufacturing process that uses far, far less energy than the way it currently does. GM's talking about designing a lot of the cobalt out of the batteries. And that's where the real solution is going to come from. I think because demand for battery raw materials is ramping up so fast, it'll get addressed. There will be more mining, more processing. But the key to getting the battery cost down is through design and manufacturing, not trying to
I would
beat
argue
down
perhaps
suppliers.
recycling. I think recycling is going to come a long way pretty quickly here. I did a story not long ago about a company called Aqua Metals, and they figured out a way to basically recycle lithium-ion batteries, collect all of the copper, the lithium, the nickel, in basically a non-destructive, non-toxic process. And I think once that gets scaled up, and other companies are probably doing the same thing, that could be a real game changer. Because right now, what percentage of lithium-ion batteries are recycled? Probably 5%. And to do that, they have to put them, they basically melt them down. And when you do that, you lose all of the lithium that was in there, from my understanding. So the Aqua Metals company is using a process that's like, it's like an electroplating process. So they can selectively pull out all of these materials, and then they're very pure and they're basically ready to go again. So in the future, perhaps Ford's banking on recycling.
Oh yeah, Ford is working with Redwood. General Motors is working with Li-Cycle. Others are working with those companies too, and we're seeing a lot of action in recycling. I think they'll probably have the processes solved this decade. In fact, well before the decade's over. The key, though, is having enough used batteries to be able to mine that material. Because Gary will remember just a few episodes ago, we had the CEO of a company called Clarios. They are the largest lead acid battery manufacturer in the world. They're also the largest lead recycler in the world. And what he told us is there's a very good chance that the lead acid battery in your car, the lead in it, could be anywhere from 50 to 60 years old. That's how long they've been recycling. So that's the vision for lithium or any kind of EV battery. But it might take a couple of decades, 20, 30 years before there's enough used batteries out there where maybe, I'm not going to say we're going to eliminate all mining, but who knows? We might see an 80% reduction in mining at that point because we can just get it from recycling, to your point.
Well, one of the things that Ford talked about, and Boris mentioned this in passing, and this seems to be a phenomenon that's growing, is this use of lithium iron phosphate, LFP batteries. Now, Craig, perhaps you know, but are these batteries providing the same type of range that typical lithium-ion batteries do, or are they slightly less so they cost less?
That's my understanding is they cost less. Ford, I believe the numbers they gave were about 10 to 15% less than the NCM chemistry, so the nickel, cobalt, manganese. But my understanding is that the LFP is less energy dense. So, and they're going to be offering those LFPs, what they announced today, on the Mach-E SUV and the Lightning. So those are going to come out, I think it was next year for the Lightning, and then 2024 for the low range offering in the F-150. So it's a trade-off. If they need to electrify everything, they're going to have to, I don't want to say cut corners, but cut some corners to build enough batteries.
Well, do you have a sense of what the decrease in range would be between the NMC and an LFP?
That I don't know, unfortunately. I imagine it wouldn't be that great of a number, but still a difference.
So going to the other side of town, General Motors announced the Blazer EV. So it's arguably its first outside the Bolt achievable vehicle for people. I mean, the Cadillac Lyriq, I mean, you're talking 60 grand. The Hummer, you're talking what, 100 grand. So they're talking about the Blazer coming in more or less around 50 grand. So how do you guys see that vehicle? Is it going to play well given its configuration being an SUV?
It's a good place to be. I mean, conceivably or theoretically, it goes right up against the Tesla Model Y with a lower entry price. I mean, the proof's in the pudding. We're all going to have to drive it and decide on it that way. I think from a styling standpoint, it looks good. The one thing that intrigued me about it is you can get it in front-wheel drive, or you can get it in rear-wheel drive, or you can get it in all-wheel drive. And I don't think any car has ever offered that combination before.
Yeah, it's intriguing the way they're offering those drivetrain combinations, and it's it's super easy to do with an EV, right? You want front wheel drive, add another motor. You want rear wheel drive, whatever, put a motor at the back. Very easy to do. But I think that the new Blazer looks great. I don't know what you guys think about the design. It's a bit Mustang Mach-E, but that's a good vehicle to sort of emulate. I really like what Chevy did with the vehicle.
I agree with you, Craig. And the other thing that I think that they nailed too is it looks like a Chevy.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if it didn't have any badges on it and you ask somebody to guess, you know, if they know this stuff, they'd guess it's probably a Chevrolet. Whereas, you know, when you look at what Hyundai's doing, and I love it, this is not a critique, but it doesn't look like any other Hyundai. I mean, you wouldn't be able to guess that it's a Hyundai.
Yet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Give it more time. You're right. But that Blazer is instantly identifiable as a Chevrolet.
So is that necessarily a good thing, though? A $50,000 Chevy. Take Corvette out and take Silverado out.
And take Suburban out and take Tahoe out. I mean, I don't think it's a problem. I think Chevrolet dealers and their customer base are well used to seeing $50,000 and up vehicles in Chevrolet dealerships.
Yeah. I mean, just what is the average transaction price? I don't have the number handy. I imagine it's in the 40s, right?
48.
There you go. Almost 50 grand. So there, I mean, the base price of the Blazer before any delivery fees is about 45, I think, for the 1LT model. So that's the front wheel drive, low range.
And as seems to be the case now, the front loaded vehicles are the expensive vehicles. And when we get to the 1LT, which will be in the first quarter of 2024, it'll be available for 45.
Yes. Yeah.
Theoretically.
Well, you can get the SS in the close to 70 if you want, you know, if you're feeling spendy.
As I'm sure you do.
Of course.
always spendy. So speaking of electric vehicles, John, you did a report card of how the various auto manufacturers have done over the first half of this year, and tell us what you found as you went through the sales numbers for these various companies.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I decided instead of looking at individual models and how they're selling, I looked at the car companies and how well they're doing. And of course, Tesla tops the list and nobody comes close to it yet. And I gave them an A+. But I was very surprised to see the Hyundai group combining Hyundai and Kia together in number 2 spot. That was very interesting to me. Ford was number 3. And I thought they did pretty well. I gave Hyundai an A, by the way, Hyundai group. I gave Ford a B+, because they've had some issues with their cars lately. You know, they've got these recall and warranty issues going. But and then Volkswagen was in 4th place. And they're dropping down the list because if you go back to last year, they were actually second only to Tesla. So Audi's doing a pretty good job of selling EVs. Porsche's doing a pretty good job too, even though it only has one model. But the Volkswagen brand, sales of the ID4 are plummeting. They're down 30% in the first half. They were down 75% in June. VW says it's because it can't get cars, but according to Ward's Intelligence, the inventory that they have now is about the same as it was a year ago. So to me, that doesn't explain why sales are down as sharply as they are, unless they just can't get cars from the port to their dealers. Something's going wrong there.
It's not particularly, the ID4 I don't find particularly compelling. It's a nice enough SUV, but it has some weird elements to it. The infotainment system is not very good at all. And then the way they design the window switches, I just put 4 window switches in it. Everybody knows how that works, right?
Explain how it works the way you don't like it.
So normally, like on the driver's side door, you have 4 power windows. There are 4 switches, 1, 2, 3, 4. Whichever window you want to go down, you hit the switch. Very easy. They've done it that way for decades. So Volkswagen, instead, they put 2 switches, and then there's a button that switches between front and rear. And their data says that customers only roll the back windows down, 5% of the time, whatever their number is, to justify this change. And it's just like, it's stupid when you go to lower a window. You have to. Oh, I put the front passenger window down. I wanted the back one down. So you have to go hit the little touch sensitive button, wait for it to engage, and then you can use the same switch to lower the window you want. It's just unnecessary.
So, Craig, do you believe there should be 2 knobs to adjust side view mirrors?
That's a good question, Gary. Touche.
Well, but I would argue, once you set the mirrors, you pretty much leave them there. Whereas the window switches, you're playing around with them almost every time you get in the car.
How often did you open your back windows of your car, John?
Every time, because I love driving with the windows down, not on the highway. And if in a 4-door car, if you lower the driver's window, you get a buffeting in the car. Whereas if you crack the rear window behind you or even lower it, it gets rid of that buffeting. So I'm always lowering the rear window behind me. It's just. But I think Craig's got a point here on the ID4, because it's not selling all that great in China, and it's not selling all that great in Europe. In fact, and this is what I got out of the report card, going back to that for a minute. You'll never guess the best-selling electric car in Europe in the second quarter. Go ahead. Give it a stab.
I know the answer, so I'm not going to say it. I'm going to have Craig answer this question.
Oh, well, Craig is going to be wrong then, because he has no idea. But I will. If it's, is it an Audi? What is it? The e-tron?
Good. No, I'll tell you. The Fiat 500e was the best-selling electric car in the last 3 months in Europe. It even outsold the Tesla Model Y, but we know Tesla couldn't export anything out of China for most of the quarter. So that's the reason for that.
Okay, but for our viewers in the United States, they need to understand that this vehicle is not the vehicle that was available on the market here. It's a completely different vehicle. It's a new 500e. Olivier Francois has exceeded all expectations with this vehicle. So
good point, Gary.
To be fair.
That's right.
Craig knows that.
We had the 500e here for at least California, right? And it was probably the best version of the 500.
Yeah, right. But remember what Sergio Marchionne said at the time, that they lost $14,000 on every one that they sold. He actually came out publicly and said, "Please do not buy this car."
I remember that. Yeah,
but
buy a few more Ram trucks and they'll offset.
That's right.
But, obviously Fiat did a good job with the new one, the new 500e, and it was the best-selling EV in Europe in the second quarter.
Companies
on for you guys. How important? A question for you guys. How important is it to have a frunk in an EV? Because some of them have frunks and others don't.
You want to take a stab, Gary?
This is an opinion.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I guess I'm somewhat confused by the utter fascination with storage in the front of a vehicle. I mean, I just don't get it. I mean, one of the big points was made about the F-150 Lightning having the frunk, and that the frunk can be used as a cooler. Well, you can buy a cooler that can be used as a cooler. And, I mean, it's just like, I just don't get it. So that's just me.
I think frunks are a great selling feature. I mean, when anybody pops the hood on the F-150 Lightning, they flip out. I mean, it's gigantic. Rivian's made a big part of its frunk. Tesla invented the frunk for all practical purposes. But we've seen this on other vehicles. Remember, if on the rear bed of the Ram pickup, on the top of the sidewalls, they have a toolbox built into it. Same thing with a drain plug, so you can fill it with ice and beer or fish if you're going fishing. And people flip out over that kind of stuff. And so
and the ridge line, you can open up the bed and
exactly.
Oh, behold, a cooler. Whoa.
Yeah, and in the Rivian R1T that
beverages, they need cold beverages.
Yeah, I'm getting a distinct impression that Gary does not like cold beverages. He's going off about coolers again.
Kringer, nice room temperature.
But anyway, if I were designing an EV, I would ask my designers to put a frunk up there.
Because like the EGMP cars from Hyundai, they technically have a frunk, but it's only big enough to fit the charging cable. It's like 0.7 cubic feet or whatever.
Yeah,
So
nah.
does that count?
In fact, I'll tell you how much, because I talked to Darren Palmer at Ford about this. When the designers mocked up the whole Lightning, and he saw what the front could be, he was like, "This is brilliant. This is fantastic. This is going to help sell EVs." And he told me every couple of weeks he'd go in and check on the program, and he'd say, "Show me what the front is like." And he told his engineers, "Wait a minute, you made it smaller. What the hell's going on here?" And they said, "Well, we had to package room for the brake booster." And he's like, "No, I don't care where you stick the brake booster." He said, "I don't even care if you have to move the brake booster on the ICE version of it. Get it the hell out of there." And he said he had a couple of battles with them where they tried to cheat on him and tried to make it a little bit smaller to package other stuff behind it. And he stuck to his guns, and that's how they got that. I describe it. It looks as big as a campground. That's how big it is.
It's a surprisingly awesome feature to have, I think.
So do you guys think that is this something that you need for either light duty pickups or crossover utility vehicles, or do all types of vehicles need to have frunks?
I'm of the opinion that if they should make it a priority to include one. When you have something like the F-150 Lightning, there's no engine or transmission, so it's probably very easy to just have that space as a storage space. When you look at something like an ID4, they didn't package stuff very effectively, so there is no frunk there. But I think engineers should be given that task to like reposition modules and brake boosters, whatever, so that they can have that extra weather-tight, lockable storage space.
So would you be against the Cadillac Lyric because it doesn't have a frunk?
I'm not against it. I am disappointed. I think it should have a frunk.
And you, John?
I think it wouldn't hurt to have a frunk.
Well, it wouldn't hurt to have lots of things.
Yeah. So what General Motors has said is, no, we did not do a frunk because we maximized the interior space.
Bingo.
So, yeah, but did they?
People, not ice.
Yeah. And you mean, frozen water, not internal combustion engine.
Correct.
When you say that. But I would like to go dig into the interior specs, leg room, headroom, shoulder room, hip room, and see if it really delivers on that. I haven't dug into those specs.
It's capacious.
Okay. If you say so, Gary.
All right. So switching slightly, staying on the electric vehicle topic, and staying on the Volkswagen topic, this week it was announced that Pablo Deci, executive chairman of Volkswagen South American region, will become the president and CEO of Volkswagen Group of America and CEO of Volkswagen North American region, while Scott Keogh, who was or still is until September 1st, CEO and president of Volkswagen Group of America and head of Volkswagen brand in North America, will become the head of the all-new Scout brand that Volkswagen owns. And Scout will begin to make electric vehicles, electric off-road vehicles. So, there are a few things at play here, in terms of the executive changes going on. And then, Volkswagen bringing back the Scout brand in, what is an increasingly crowded market. How do you guys interpret this?
Go ahead,
When
Craig.
did they buy Scout? I don't even know. I didn't know they owned it, and then suddenly, we're bringing it back. Like,
It came with International when they bought that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, when Volkswagen Truck Group bought Navistar. Navistar is the remnants of International Harvester, and the rights to the Scout brand came along with that. What I still want to know is who in Volkswagen found that out. They didn't say anything about Scout when they were talking about buying Navistar. And I think they, probably someone was going through all the paperwork and went, "Hey, look, we got the rights to the Scout brand."
But it's a good name for a product too. Like,
look, I think it's a brilliant move for them. I think it could do really, really well for them. But I got to tell you, I didn't see Scott Keogh moving over there as a promotion. So I'm curious about that move.
Well, couldn't you argue that basically, Keogh's had a number of jobs throughout Volkswagen Group in his tenure there, and he's been working for a well-established brand. He worked at Audi, well-established. Worked at Volkswagen, well-established. Now he gets to basically be the head of a startup. I mean, that would be pretty cool.
It would be if it is a standalone company. As Audi is standalone within the group, or Porsche is standalone within the group, or Seat or Skoda or whatever. If they treat it that way, then that's a pretty good place to land. But if it's just a brand that's an adjunct to Volkswagen, I mean, then you're just a glorified brand manager.
Well, according to our friend Joanne Muller, who is with Axios, Axios What's Next newsletter, I believe, she reports Scout will be an independent US-based company, which will allow it the flexibility to take on partners or other investors, or even go public someday, Volkswagen execs told her. So,
well, then I take back what I said about maybe Scott Keogh not getting a promotion. If he can run it as a true startup and go outside the company to get things done, that's pretty exciting.
So production is going to start in 2026. And of course, they're going to be making vehicles that will be competing with the likes of the Jeep Wrangler and the Ford Bronco. Craig, do you think that vehicles like this are going to continue to have the level of popularity that they do now? Or is this something that is going to become like, I don't know, muscle cars?
Everyone and their cousin is driving a four-door Wrangler, at least around Detroit here. So I don't know that the popularity of that sort of lifestyle vehicle is going to taper off. I don't see that happening. Unless gas is like $10 a gallon, then maybe people will get a more sensible vehicle. But yeah, just the number of
electric
Wranglers you see.
These Scouts are going to be electric, right?
That's very true. So, I mean, if they're electric, then there's no compromise, really. I mean, you're charging up for pennies on the dollar compared to gas. You've got instant torque. Yes, I think they will continue to be super popular.
But here's my question: are they going to build Scouts like at the plant in Tennessee, or are they going to get their own plant?
Well, since you were just talking about the
Magna,
yeah, go to Magna and have it built.
Or you're talking about the ID4 not being so popular, given the fact that they just started making ID4s in Chattanooga. Maybe they'll have some space available to build Scouts.
The Scout products might just be a reskinned ID4. I forget what the architecture is called.
That's MEB.
Yes.
MEB, nah, that's just a modification of MQB, which is an ICE-based platform. They got to go clean sheet if they want to do this right.
So says John.
Are they going to?
So says I. I'm very down on ICE modified BEVs.
Yes. Okay.
So you don't like the Lightning then?
Well, I will admit, Craig,
or is this a
Ford
caveat?
did a hell of a good job with the Lightning. I will concede that. In fact, I would argue they did a better job than Rivian.
We need to get John a gavel so John hath spake. Judgment rendered.
All right, John. So Tesla came out with its Q2 numbers. What did you think?
I thought they did a hell of a good job. I mean, we know they lost all this production. The numbers were down compared to the prior 2 quarters, but they were substantially better than a year ago. So we know why the numbers were down. Shanghai and lockdown and blah, blah, blah. They can't export. They had a hard time building stuff. So I'd say all things considered, those were pretty damn good numbers.
What'd you think, Craig?
I think I didn't see the numbers yet. So I'm not going to comment.
You know the number that I thought was very interesting, John, is the fact that financials, yeah, that's great, good for them, and but the Q2 numbers for the number of superchargers. So in Q2 21, they had 2,966 superchargers, the stations, and in Q2 22, that's up to 3,971. So they basically added 1,000 more. I mean, I find that to just be
That's staggering.
very impressive.
Yep.
And that's the killer app. That's the reason to get a Tesla,
Right.
honestly, is the supercharger network. Nobody comes close to them when
Right.
it comes to long haul charging.
Right.
Because let's be honest, the Tesla products generally aren't, I'm going to get a lot of hate for this probably, but they're generally not that good, I don't think. But the supercharger network, man, that's the reason to get one.
Hey, one other thing too, Gary, manufacturing. So I looked this up. Last year, Tesla outsold Subaru. This year, it will outsell Mazda. And I'll go out on a limb and say at the end of next year, it will have outsold BMW. And I'm talking on a global basis.
And so speaking of manufacturing, John, we were talking yesterday offline, and we were talking about capacity. So I looked at the numbers. Fremont has the ability to make 650,000 vehicles. Shanghai, 750,000 vehicles. Berlin, 250,000 vehicles. In Austin, 250,000 vehicles, which means they have a capacity of 1.9 million vehicles right now.
Right.
And, you know,
but they're not there. I mean, the capacity's there, but they're not built. I mean, Berlin and Austin haven't wrapped up to that. But yeah, right. they will get there. Right.
Right. But I mean, so we were talking earlier in the show about, you know, Ford talking about 600,000 vehicles at the end of next year.
Right.
You know, the Fremont plant, the long in the tooth Fremont plant, has got 650,000 unit capacity itself.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Well, everyone's catching up to Tesla, right? They're
got a long way to go to catch up to Tesla because Shanghai's got 750,000 capacity.
Right. I mean, that's why GM and Ford have been very careful when they say that they're going to outsell Tesla. They say in the United States. And they're putting in the manufacturing capacity to be able to do that. But then there's this thing about, okay, you put in the capacity, can you sell it? So that's going to be their challenge.
If gas prices stay high, consumers will probably start shifting to EVs at an increasing rate. But will gas prices stay high?
No. I mean, but when will they come? They will come down. Yeah. History shows they always do.
Yeah.
But when? So, I mean, they could stay high for another year or two.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess, I mean, I just get back to this whole issue of frugality, and I just wonder whether, you know, the average American is going to say, hey, I want to spend 50 grand to buy an electric vehicle because it's going to save me money on gasoline. I just don't see that happening.
They're practically spending that on an ICE car, though.
Yeah, and spending $5 a gallon.
Right, and what's the popularity of that? It's just crashing. It's declining, and so I'm just you know waiting for this, you know, General Motors $30,000 electric vehicle. You know, when's that going to happen? When are we going to see that?
That's next year, is when they'll show it to us.
And
I believe it might even be later this year.
Is that the Equinox, or is that something else?
Equinox. Right.
And when will that be on the market?
It's a couple years, isn't it?
It's either late next year or 24. So it's coming. But in the meantime, you can buy a $26,000 Chevrolet Bolt.
True point.
Which isn't a bad vehicle, even at that price.
I agree. I mean, it's
older.
For that price, you know, it's very compelling.
Does it have a frunk?
No. I don't believe so.
I don't think so.
It doesn't?
Well, remember.
Now Gary wants a frunk.
Yeah, Gary. No. Maybe that's what we should title the show. Gary does want a frunk. Hey, guys, we've burned up an hour. We should probably wrap it up.
Okay.
Craig, great having you on the show.
Thank you, John, as always. A pleasure to be here, and thank you, Gary, as well. I'll send you a cooler.
Thank you.
Real good.
Okay.
Thanks everybody.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.